Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Track Car Obsession. In this video we're going to tear into the RX-8 power steering, see if we can lose a little bit of weight off the front of the car. Stay tuned. Alright guys, well I'm going to jump right into this here. I've already got the rack off the car and I'm going to do a little bit of talking over the time lapses here. Do way too much talking in this video, but anyway, one recommendation I would say here is go ahead and remove the tie rod ends, at least the passenger side tie rod end, while you still have the rack and pinion on the car. It's a whole lot easier. But we're going to get in pretty in depth here because I couldn't find any information online, so I wanted to go ahead and make it as informative as I could. Alright, so now I've got the main casing taken off the shaft here. You've got, this is the main outer casing that's around the motor of the electric power steering. See if I can show you the inside here. This is the first time taking this apart, so this is just as new to me as any of you guys that haven't seen the inside here, but I thought that this would be just kind of an outer shell, but it's actually got the magnets inside here, and then down in the bottom there's a bearing, and this is what sits on that bearing and supports this end of the shaft. And then you have the metal, or the coil that the electricity is sent through this connector here. That's your main power connector on your power steering. It's like a black with red stripe and then a red wire. But those come down here and then go to your brushes, and then you've got this coil which sits inside the magnetic casing there, and it basically rotates on this screwed shaft. So your torque sensor, which was the first thing I took off that you could see, this sits right here and it measures the torque pressed on the your steering shaft, and then that determines how much power they need to send to this electric motor to assist in turning. As you can see, as you turn this, it helps with the shaft. So you're turning the steering wheel back and forth, moving this in and out, and this electric motor sends power to assist with it going in and out there. But the idea here, which may be a complete failure now because I've got to take this apart further to see if this is even an option, but the original idea was to take this cover off and then pull all these guts out, because not running power steering, not only does this coil add extra weight, but it adds drag, friction to this shaft. So it makes the not having power steering even harder than it could be, or at least that's the idea. So I read on the forum that some race teams for the Grand Am series used to use the factory electric steering, and then they would gut the inside. But it was maybe one post on a single forum thread that I saw. It had zero details, it was just mentioned. So I thought that maybe that could be an idea for us to lose some weight and to make not having power steering a little bit easier. But after taking this casing off, it looks like it's going to be a little bit harder than I thought. Anyway, once I pulled that off, I just wanted to give you an update, let you know where we were, and to give you a closer look. Alright, quick update. I don't know if you can see in there. So before, when I showed you, it was kind of like a metal covering around the outer section, which, like I said, was basically all magnets. I didn't know if it was separate pieces or what, but the more I looked at it, the more I realized I should just go ahead and try and pry. So I started prying out the metal kind of shielding or cover, and then there's actually just long pieces of magnet that are just basically stuck up against the outer housing, which I'm not honestly sure how that's possible, but it doesn't look like they're stuck in with any type of adhesive. Maybe this metal covering is what holds them on, but it feels like they're stuck on there. Like I said, I don't know how that's possible because this casing I'm pretty sure is aluminum. So anyway, sorry for the bad lighting. Once I pull these out, I'll show you exactly what they look like. Alright, so update. I've got all the magnets out and the sleeve, so now it's just the bearing that is left down in there. You can kind of see it right there. That bearing is what rides, or this, I should say, this part of the shaft rides on that bearing. So it's key that we keep this and the bearing that's pressed in here. But this is the metal covering, or at least what's left of it. What you have are these cylindrical magnets, or curved magnets that form a lining for the whole cylinder. They line up all around it, and then this with the insulators in between them. They're in between each of these slots down in there, and then like I said, the sleeve is down the middle. And what I did, I just kind of pried a little bit at the top against the wall, and this isn't, none of these things are held in with adhesive. It's all magnetized on there, which is, like I said previously, pretty strange because I thought this was aluminum, but apparently it's not, or it's got some kind of oxide iron in here or something that is allowing the magnets to stick to them, because the magnets do attract to this for some reason. But anyway, then you have this like stainless steel collar that's down the middle of them, and that's what surrounds the coil here. The longer that I look at this, the more I realize I have no idea how this comes off. There must be some kind of special tool to fit in here to release this shaft, but I can't really figure out what to do. So I will probably, since I've already basically gone past the point of no return where I've removed those magnets, there's really no reason to keep this coil. So if I can't find a way to remove this whole shaft and pull this coil off, we'll just probably take a die grinder or you know, something and remove as much of this coil as we can while leaving this outer shaft you know, on here. So the bearings in here will not be touched, and then this will still ride on the bearing that's in the outer housing. So what this will do, I mean, we've already reduced some of the friction because the magnets on these coils produce a you know, a friction from the magnetism there, especially with the motor disconnected. So with the magnets gone, you're not going to have that opposing force, but you still have the weight of this coil that when you you know, turn your steering shaft, your steering wheel, it's still having to push this arm, which is forcing this to turn. So the least amount of weight we have here, you know, the less resistant that we have against this shaft. So it'll make the manual steering a little bit easier. It may be a small amount, but every little amount will help.
Alright guys, for the rest of the video, or at least for the next little bit, I'm just going to post some pictures here because you know, I talked way too much in the beginning of this video, and I just want to get through this for you. I also didn't know how long it was going to take to also cut up this motor. So this picture here shows the windings, the copper, you know, wires that run through motor, and then the section that it runs through is called the armature. So those are the main components here that I'm going to be removing. And the easiest way that I found to do this, where I had it at least in my living room, so I didn't make too much of a mess, was just by taking some snips and cutting up the copper wires and then pulling them out one by one. Once I had those pulled out, I was left with quite a bit of mess with the resin and everything that was left over there. So I went ahead and vacuumed that up, but you can already see from all the copper there that quite a bit of weight was removed. And then you know, you're left with the armature, which is, as you can see in this picture, it's basically a ton of thin plates of metal that hold the copper wires, the windings, in a specific location, and this is all like glued or resined to the shaft. So the easiest way to take this apart could be a cutoff wheel or a Dremel or something just to cut through. I didn't want to make a mess in my living room, and I also didn't know exactly how this was attached and how deep it was going to have to go. So I just used a flathead screwdriver, pulled off small sections at a time, just kind of like slid it to the side. It's not attached too much to there, to the shaft there with the resin. You can break it loose, and then I just used snips to snip off sections of that until I was left with just the shaft and some resin left. So I vacuumed this all up and then cut those brush wires, and it was ready to go back together.
Alright, so here is kind of the final product. I wanted to actually take this sensor off and just put like a metal plate here to block off the hole that this goes in. I mean sensor, not sensor, but the plug where it goes to the brushes for the motor. But the screws that are on here are stripped out, so I could, you know, cut them down or drill them out. But then I'd have to drill and tap to put the plate and all that stuff. So all I did was just cut them here at the connectors where they had the wires to the brushes. But as you can see, quite a bit of mass has been pulled out of this, because you know, you had the big motor in there, and then inside this housing there was the magnets. So I'm just going to throw this housing back on and then get it mounted back in the car, and it should be done. Alright guys, so while we have the rack, the steering rack, out of the car, I've gone ahead and taken the steering shaft back out of the car again. The reason for this is the more that I've done the wiring and everything, and I've decided that I'm getting rid of all the factory gear. There's no reason to have this ignition lock cylinder here. It's just, I kept it here so that we could continue to use the key that has, you know, it's got a chip in it and everything. So but taking this off will clean up the shaft, get this stuff out of the way, especially in a wreck if my legs hit the steering column or something like that. The less stuff I have here, the better. But it's also going to take off some more weight. Alright, so in order to do this, from what I can tell, there's these two bolts here that look like they've been, you know, attached at the factory. And then I don't know if you can tell in the camera there, but it looks like they grind that off or knock it off somehow so that you can't unscrew them. So my first attempt here is going to be somewhat civilized. I'm going to take a cutoff wheel and just try and cut like a slot in it so I can take a big screwdriver and try and twist them out. If that doesn't work, then the cutoff wheel is just going to continue to cut the rest of this off. So we're going to go ahead and try the first way and see if that works. The other thing I want to do too is get this metal off here, so it'll again lose a little bit more weight, have less sharp things in the way inside the car. Alright, so there's one notch. I'm going to go ahead and try and hit this with a screwdriver, see if we can take that out. If it doesn't work, then there's no reason to go ahead and try and cut a notch in the other side. Oh, it's actually a lot easier than I thought. Alright, so we know that works. Let's go ahead and spin this thing around and do the other one. Alright, so I popped that off. It looks like it was off camera a little bit, but But there it is right there. You know, I know it seems like it's pretty insignificant. I mean, I gotta tell you, it's pretty solid. So I'd say it's at least 3 pounds. Yeah, I could be wrong there, but it's probably about 3 pounds. But you know, every little bit helps. Now, as you can see here, and I knew it was gonna do this up front, but there's some notches here on the sides. I don't know if you can see that, but there's some notches here in the sides of this plate from where the cutoff wheel went, just because it was so large. I don't care about that. I'm actually going to cut the rest of this off. But if you did care about that, you could always use a Dremel with a little cutoff disc, and that way you could focus just on the screw head and not hit any of this in case you needed to, you know, replace one of these in your car. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this piece and this piece off camera, and then that is it for our steering column. As far as I know for right now, that is it for the steering column. And then we're going to go ahead and put the rack back in and put this back in lined up so that the steering wheel is all straight. Alright, so here's the finished product with the steering shaft. I've got the rack installed, and then the steering shaft, like I said before, I pulled off those, you know, metal hinges and everything that weren't needed, as well as the lock cylinder, and then painted it black. So it's straight now. So this steering wheel is centered. Now that is probably going to change once we get it all aligned. I've got the wheels as straight as I can right now, but the toe is definitely out. So once it's aligned, we'll go ahead and straighten this back out, but it should be pretty easy. But that's it for the steering. Alright, well, that about wraps it up for the steering. We aren't really going to do any more modifications to the steering right now. Like I said, it's going to need an alignment, but as soon as that's done, we may have to realign the steering shaft a little bit where so the steering, sorry for the train noises, so that the steering wheel is straight. But other than that, it's all wrapped up. It's all done. I'm not going to be able to make it any lighter than it is. If we run into issues where the car is just way too difficult to drive without power steering, then we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But right now, we've reduced a bunch of weight because not only did we gut most of the power steering itself, but that allowed us to get rid of the wiring, the EPS, the electronic power steering control module. It's also letting us get rid of the actual Mazda ECU because we're getting rid of the ABS and the instrument cluster as well. So with all those things combined, we're able to shed a lot more weight than we would have been able to if we kept the other stuff. And because the car is going to be so light, and like I said, we just gutted the steering, it should be a little bit easier to drive than having your standard no power steering on a car with full weight. So we'll see how it goes. If we hit the track and it's too much work, then we'll figure something out. But hopefully this wasn't too long. I'm sure it wasn't a part of the project that most of you guys are interested in. But if you found it helpful, just please give it a thumbs up, and we'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Take care.